to see you. It sure did, yeah. You know, it's going to be an exciting thing. I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys can do. It's a lasting legacy, right? Like it's something you can say, hey, I go back. That's right. A special, an emeritus member at least. Right, yeah. You got to be careful. They kick you out of the youth category pretty quick. Oh, yeah. That's a non-controversial. Yep. Okay. Good evening, everyone. It is 6 o'clock. Today is January 28th, 2025, and we will call this meeting of the Senior and Community Task Force to order. We have our agenda here. Thank you very much. We've got our agenda in front of us this evening. First on our agenda is roll call, and I will go ahead and call the roll. Chair Hendrickson here. Member Nardo Ferris. Here. Member Vagnosi. Here. Member Malley. Member Hood. Member Nagasetti. Here. Member Robertson. Here. Member Maisner. Member Steed. Here. Okay, we've got 6 of us here, 3 absences. We knew about 1 at least, and we knew that Mr. Malley would be running a few minutes late, so he'll be joining us in a little bit. And so we'll go ahead and get rolling. We have a couple of opportunities for public remarks this evening. The first one is right now. And so we would ask that you please limit your public remarks to 3 minutes. I've got a timer here that I will go ahead and get started on. And please make sure that you address your comments to the task force and not the members in the audience. And note that our meeting format does not allow us to reply directly to public comment as it's happening, but we may be able to address those later in the meeting, as well as direct them to staff to answer if we can't do that ourselves. So with that said, we do have a couple of our green cards here for public comment. First to the microphone is Suzanne Lealoa. Pardon me. Yes, please.
Okay. What do you need? Do you need
name and address if you would, please?
My name is Suzanne Lealoha, and my address is 2077 Loch Dumont in Hazlet. And I just thank you for letting me make comments. And I'm going to kind of read from the email that I sent to the task force recently. But I would like to say that I agree with my fellow senior center member, Julie Stouffer, as my own preferences are for a standalone building for the new senior center as well. The proposal is provided in your packet for the agenda for this meeting, doubles the size of our existing building and does not sound reasonable when there isn't a need for all that extra space for our senior center. It is also confusing as to why the Parks and Recreation staff would be sharing the office space with the senior center administration. I feel the idea of a standalone senior center as beautifully set out by Barb O'Kelly in her Phase 1 plan with incremental Phases 2 and 3 to follow sounds much more acceptable and perfectly reasonable. I have been a senior center member, participant, and volunteer since 2014. I have thoroughly enjoyed spending time with my own age group. I would also like to keep our area more private for our seniors. I do not agree that seniors would do better being with people of all ages. The senior center, to most of us, is a place where we can go and not worry about our safety or our security, and to spend quality time with others who understand what we are going through as we age. Please strongly consider the proposed Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3 submitted by Barb O'Kelly. Thank you. And I am a senior center member and a longtime volunteer librarian at the senior center. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up is Jim Salee, And then Neil Bowlby, you're on deck. Or Souls, pardon.
Souls, yeah. Good evening. My name is Jim Souls. I'm here on behalf of the Meridian Community Band. My personal address, though, is 3894 White Pine Drive out in DeWitt. Again, my name is Jim Souls, president of the Meridian Community Band. We're a nonprofit organization that has served Meridian Township in the greater Lansing area since 1974. Our mission is to provide an opportunity for community musicians to come together, rehearse, and perform for the greater community in the American town band tradition. The band performs 9 to 12 concerts annually, including our free spring and holiday concerts, the Memorial Day program at Glendale Cemetery, and our summer concert series, which includes venues like Lake Lansing Park South and the Meridian Farmers Market. These events are open to all and foster cultural enrichment, bringing people of all ages together to enjoy music. We also host the Red Cedar Festival of Community Bands, bringing bands from across Michigan and sometimes beyond to Meridian Township. A critical need for any community band is a rehearsal space. And at 85 members, we're not fitting into anybody's garage. We're grateful to Oakham's Public Schools for the ability to use their facilities, but rehearsal space is a significant portion of our budget, and we're unable to store large instruments or our library of sheet music in our rehearsal space. That's just a couple of the reasons why we're excited about a music rehearsal space being a possibility at a new senior and community center. A dedicated music space would benefit the entire community. It would eliminate barriers for new groups looking to form and foster collaboration between bands, choirs, theater groups, or other arts organizations. It could also position the center as a hub for the arts, where local groups can advertise openings, high school music directors could connect students to other opportunities, and residents can discover new ways to get involved. Having the rehearsal space within the senior center offers additional benefits. Seniors who already have established transportation to and from the center could more easily join arts groups, form their own ensembles, or enjoy small performances held just for them. We know that engaging in music provides immense mental health and social benefits for all. In addition to a rehearsal space, we encourage the task force to consider dedicated and secured storage rooms for groups like ours, as well as musician-friendly seating, music stands, and proper acoustic design and soundproofing to ensure quality rehearsals and avoid disruptions to others. I want to thank you for your time and the opportunity to speak tonight. The Meridian Community Band is excited about the possibility of contributing to such a space that supports the arts and enriches the lives of all residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Neil Bowlby, and then Jean McDonald, you're on deck.
Neil Bowlby, live in Hazlet. The last couple meetings seemed to have focused around, and there was a special group with just the seniors, a needs assessment. And I think it's important to distinguish needs from wants and hope fors. What the community needs is a senior center to replace, at a minimum, the activities and programs that are offered currently, maybe with a few extras. We may want a community center, we may want pickleball courts and all that other kind of stuff, but the need is for a senior center. I was using that crosstabs table that you guys had for comparing things. I like to play with numbers, and so I was looking at what's the population size of these places versus the size of their community center or senior center. Unfortunately, there's no overhead here anymore, so you can't see my little table. I'll try to summarize it as best as I can. Osceola Community Center is, if you take the building square feet that's in that and compare it to the population, Osceola includes Howell and several other townships. So it works out to be about 0.8 square feet per person, per resident. Portage Community Center is about 0.65 square feet per resident. Farmington Hills, 1.0, and Hannah Center in East Lansing is about 1.5. The average of those four, I left out the Foster and Letts from Lansing because those are just small little ones. For community centers, it's about 0.98 square feet per resident, so roughly one. For senior centers, I went to population pyramids and pulled out numbers for the senior centers, and using age of 55 years and up is what I considered seniors. That may not be the strict definition, but suits the purpose. Currently, Meridian Senior Center is about 1 square foot per person. It's about 10,000 population and 11,000 square feet. Williamston is about 1.6. Holt is about 1.1. Stockbridge about 0.8. Bath Township about 0.8. Surprisingly, it comes out to be about 1 square foot. The average is about 1 square foot per person, person in that category. So based on those numbers, the senior center for Meridian Township should be 11,000 square feet to be consistent with that, which is kind of what the plans are for a senior center, not with a lot of the wants of extra office space and stuff. As far as full community center, yeah, I just had to spend a lot of time on numbers that you couldn't see. I'll wind it up real quick. The Yonkers plan for a full community center was about 44,000 square feet, which with a population of 44,000 fits the mold. Everybody was happy with that except for the price. I too endorsed Barbara O'Kelly's plan of a three-phase project with about 10, 11, 12,000 square feet for the senior center, doing just senior center stuff. Based on the numbers, the cost would be, I think, well, at $500 per square foot, 10,000 is 5 million, 12,000 is 6 million, add on a little bit. So you're talking, $6 to $8 million, which we almost have already with the grant and a little thrown in from the township. Community center is something I think should be brought to the community and not burden the taxpayer.
Thank you. And Mr. Bowlby, if you do want to give your facts and figures
I will send an email that has all of that in it.
Perfect. Thank you.
I didn't have time to do it before the meeting.
We do appreciate that. Jean McDonald and then Barbara O'Kelly, you're on deck. And Barbara is our last green card. If anyone else would wish to speak, please turn in a green card if you would. Ms. McDonald.
Jean McDonald. I live in Hazlet on 2019 Lac Dumont in Lake of the Hills apartments, condos. And I sit on the board for the senior center here in Meridian Township. People have been very curious and very concerned about that the time is running out for us to spend and encumber that money. And I don't know what the latest thing is, what the plans are. What are your plans? When do you need to settle everything? Because if I understand it's this fall, that's going to be very, very touchy and hard to spend and encumber that money. People are very concerned about their taxes. They want to know what they can do to tell you that we can chunk this thing up like Barbara O'Kelly has written down, can we do this in pieces? Can we have a part one and spend the money? If we need more, wait a year or two or whatever and do part two and a part three. Do we want to use a former school? Do we want to buy some land? All those kinds of things are floating around there, people asking questions, and I can't even answer all those questions. So I wish that you would address those things in some way, in writing or in speaking to some of the neighborhood groups, because I think they're getting very nervous that time is running out and what's going to happen to their taxes. So I hope that, that you will consider the cost, the type of buildings. The consensus, everybody was, we want a senior center. But how can we expand that to include some of the other things that people want to have, like pickleball courts and outdoor activities? So I would urge you to please keep in touch. Come visit us at the senior center and, say that you're coming there to answer all these questions, because I think that there is a very big hole in terms of what are your plans? You've heard all kinds of people from all the neighborhoods. What's the percentage of people saying one building, two-part building, three-part? We don't know what we are all saying, except if we've been at these meetings. And there are a lot of people who haven't come to the meetings and are concerned that we will not have the fine senior center that we've always had. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara O'Kelly?
Thank you. You've heard about this three-part plan. I've sent it to the task force. Have you received it? Okay. So I would urge you to seriously consider this alongside with the 4 alternatives that have been proposed by the staff. I want to reiterate that current members of the Meridian Senior Center want to replace our current senior center, and that needs to be put getting going quite soon. I believe our funds need to be planned by September of this year, and then spent or encumbered by the end of next year. I also believe that you need to move forward on site selection. I personally very much like the idea of the golf course, the driving range, because that could potentially accommodate many needs of the community. There's space there for a senior center, a recreation center, and a community center. There's room for additional baseball diamonds, soccer fields, things that the Parks and Recreation Department needs. There's a woods there that we could have walking trails in, that the Land Preservation Trust, I hope, would be interested in. So I would be very happy to discuss further the possibility of a 3-phase plan, how I think about that. I believe that I tried to incorporate all the different spaces that were in the the Meridian Senior and Community Center that the staff prepared. So I think everything is there. I think the senior center, the voters of Meridian Township have repeatedly approved providing millages for that. And so I think we can do that within the budget, perhaps by also taking the expiring millage from the fire station. I think we do need to go to the community to see what they think about having a rec center and a community center. And I would urge you to keep those separate, partly because the architectural requirements are quite different for the community center and the recreation center, the high ceilings and so forth. If you have any questions, I would be delighted to answer them now, later, or individually. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Anyone else for public comment? Okay, seeing none, public comment is closed at 6:17 PM. Next on our agenda is item 4, approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda this evening?
I move to approve the agenda for this
Moved
evening.
by Member Nardo Ferris. Do we have a second? Second by Member Steed. Any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor of the agenda as presented, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Next on our agenda is approval of our minutes. In our packet this evening, we do have our minutes from our December 10th meeting. Thank you to our staff for helping to prepare those. Do we have a motion on the minutes this evening? Moved by Member Robertson. Do we have a support? Supported by Member Vagnozzi. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. Next on our agenda is communications from the public. We did have a number of communications that made it in time for printing in our packet. And I will share that we also received 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I believe 6 communications via email, which will be included in our next packet But we did have those forwarded to us by our township staff, so thank you to those folks who weighed in that way. I do want to take a moment of personal privilege here to recognize that we also have our new township manager, Tim Dempsey, in the room, who is joining us. It is his second day on the job, and so we welcome him to the township. Certainly, this is an important project to be aware of and to be involved in, and so we appreciate you joining us. As well as Kathy Sunland, who's one of our trustees, is here in the back as well. Obviously, this will be coming before the board in a couple of months, and so we'll getting a little sneak preview, which we appreciate. Next on our agenda is the bulk of our agenda here, which will be the programming and cost discussion. And so this is I've lost my cursor, item 7A. And for this, we'll turn things over to our Community Planning and Development Director, Tim Schmidt.
Thank you. Just to start in turn, I want to touch base on site while I have the floor here briefly. I don't have a definitive answer yet, but it certainly sounds like our opportunity for the non-township owned property that we have an offer out on is unlikely to be accepted given the number that they're looking for on that property. They don't appear to want or have much wiggle room in their price. So I will have a definitive answer on that later this week. But at this point, we should be preparing in our minds to be moving forward on the township-owned property adjacent to the fire station. I will follow up later this week when I've been told I should get a final, at least a more definitive answer than I have now. So I just wanted to start with that. And then in terms of the funding, Director Wazinski and I had a conversation with the state about that. And actually, Director Wazinski had a previous professional relationship with Mrs. Masterson at the state. And so that was a very fruitful conversation. And there, we are moving in the right direction. We are still well within our timeframes. They're still confident that we're doing the right things and are expecting sort of a decision in April, and which is where we're headed. And then we will discuss next steps for them, because obviously once we start to get into real soft costs and things of that nature, those are costs of the project. And so that is an eligible expense, and we'll begin the process of starting to draw down those funds once we get into the brass tacks. But we gave them an update. They're comfortable with where we're headed, whether it's senior or senior community center. We are on the right track. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Adam Hopkins, who is remote. He is our consultant from Progressive, to sort of walk us through the 4 space planning options that they developed as a result of the public meetings that we held late last year. Also, as a result of all the input that we had previously developed from the work on the Yonkers site. And so with that, Adam, you're up.
If I could, before we have Adam begin here, I do think it's prudent, since we did receive a number of communications on the topic of the expanded size of the senior center. We've always known that what we would see at this meeting would be basically the all-in everything version of the designs and the plans, right? I think I did my best to point out at our December meeting that January and February are going to be about getting what was presented in January down to the reasonable size and cost estimates that the township is willing to take on. And so, I too was rather taken aback by the 23,000 square feet for senior center only. That it's a lot, right? It's more than double what we currently have. And I even had to remind myself that yes, this is what we said was going to happen. This is the Cadillac version of this with everything that was asked for at both of the design charrettes. And so the hard work that this committee, this task force is going to face is going to be looking at this and saying, do we want the Cadillac? Or do we need to scale this back and pull it back and look at, what is fiscally a reasonable solution? And that goes really for all four of the proposed, the consultant proposed design options. And so I think that's just as a table setting of, to give the folks in the room a little, peace of mind before we begin. This is where we're starting. We're starting with the most, and we're going to look at, what we need to, whether we want to go with that or pull it back over the next couple of months here. Mr. Dagnosi.
If this is germane, excuse me, I'd like to get a clarification for the rationale for moving the Parks and Recreation staff into the new building. Tim, do we want to address that now, or can we, or
I
should
think it would probably be more prudent to let Adam do a full presentation on this, and then we can answer questions.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's a good idea. Thank you.
That's fine.
But we will get into that because I think that's an important discussion point to have here.
Yes.
Mr. Hopkins, sorry for the false start, if you would, please.
You're muted, Adam.
Thank you. No problem for the kind of false start. I have prepared to share on screen the different programs along with associated opinions of probable cost. Would you like me to share those on the screen now as we walk through them?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. All right. So are you seeing on screen?
Yeah, Tim, maybe we could get rid of the chat window there so it's full screen. That got a little bit more room.
Let's try that.
All right, I think we've got it to as big a resolution as we can.
Well, my understanding is that the committee should have copies of all of these programs in advance. We certainly, based on the comments by the community, my understanding is that other community members have seen copies of this. So there shouldn't really be any new information here as far as the programs go. Unfortunately, it's going to get a little smaller as I share like the full list. We can go through each of these programs kind of line by line, but I'll give a quick overview of the ideas of the four different program concepts, and then we can talk about dollars per square foot. The first concept program has no gym. And let me back up and say these programs, when I say programs, basically, as you can tell, it's a list of spaces. Each activity is listed, and then the square footage for that activity, whether it's vestibule, lobby, reception, and then maybe there's some notes on it. So when I say program, that's what I mean. Rather than say a program that you might have a card game is a program that is offered at the center. That being said, we've got multiple programs. One of them has no gym at all, no indoor pickleball. One of them, the next one has an indoor pickleball space. The next concept program is if we did combine the community center and the senior center together into one facility. And then the last one, and that third option has one gymnasium that could serve multi-generational activities. And then the last one is saying, okay, if we had two separate gymnasiums, essentially have a senior center with a pickleball court and then a community center with a separate gymnasium. And so that's what that third page was. I'll say too, with all of these, the program or this list of spaces came from our meetings with community members. We've had multiple input sessions. And so we as consultants aren't trying to drive you to a particular number at all. We're trying to provide insight. If you would like to have a room for presentation that would seat, say, 150 people, we can recommend the size of that room and the features of that room so that it best performs for a particular task. So just to be clear, we're not looking to make the building bigger or smaller. We're trying to respond to their requests. The most recent program that we published had some notes, because we've had several published. Sorry, I'm going to come down here. You'll see a note A is a reduction in program area based on the committee members, the last steering committee meetings we had with community input. A B is additional or new program areas or service, and C is if an area was expanded from previous. So this was just a way to help the committee track changes in the program as we go along. Would the committee like, my perception is that people are familiar with this program, but would the committee like me to go through, I can go fairly high level, but would you like me to go review the program again?
Members, I think, what do we think here? We have been a part of this discussion throughout. Is there value in having going through it line by line again, or are we comfortable with what we've seen here in the packet and can just go through sort of the high levels?
I think the high levels works for me.
agree.
And if there's particular areas, we can go back afterwards and ask about.
Yeah, I think, Adam, let's stick to the 30,000-foot view here. And we'll come back for more detail if we're feeling like we need it.
And that's kind of what I was anticipating. Some of the things that I would point out, well, one of the new pieces of information that the committee members have is the dollars per square foot for the different concept options. Let me go through, I'll go through high level. On all of the programs, we've got a reception area, whether we do it in a single phase or multiple phases. We've got reception included so that we've got a safe and secure entry point to the building. Administrative offices, we can get into discussion at a later point. In all of these concepts, we had some administrative spaces. There's not a whole lot. You can see all of the administrative spaces together, about 2,000 square feet, including conference rooms and things. So there was administrative space in the new building. Then meeting rooms. In this program, we've got a large group space with a flat floor for 120, which is actually larger than the community center's current kind of open space. And so there, you could fit more people at tables and chairs. The notes on the side help to understand how many square feet per person would be planned. In that space, we'd have a raised platform, provide a ramp to make it barrier-free to have access to the platform. And then we'd have table and chair storage so that the tables and chairs could be removed so that room could be used for another activity that doesn't have tables and chairs in it. In this program, certainly the secondary room for meetings for 40, that is certainly not in your existing facility today. But was being suggested that we'd have a secondary space. Another point, a warming kitchen. You see the C here, through our conversations with community members, the warming kitchen started fairly small, but as a place to have a banquet, I shouldn't really say banquet, a place where there could be luncheons. And almost every one of our meetings, there's been a request, we'd like to be able to have a luncheon, whether it's catered or someone brings in food, we'd like to be able to serve from a warming kitchen. In the last round, that kitchen grew a bit more based on input from community members. So in this one, we've got a warming kitchen, which is a feature that is not in your present facility. And then activity areas, the kind of soft seating and lounge type space, a general place for fireside chats and hospitality. So that's grouped together. And then separate spaces for billiards and table tennis. You presently have those like off to the side in the larger room. And that was a concern for a number of people. The noise and the type of activity conflicting if there was a quiet activity in the same space. So on all of these, we're separating those types of activities. Some spaces that are not present in the program that you have today in your current facility, we've got secondary classroom spaces and other small conference room spaces that are listed here. And then activity spaces, something that's a holdover. When we're looking at if this is a larger facility, having senior center or senior specific toilet rooms that are directly adjacent to kind of the large activity space, so that if you're in a group setting, you don't have to go too far down the hall to find a restroom. We've got additional toilet rooms that, because depending on the size of the facility, the final size, the code will determine the number of toilet fixtures. And so having those distributed a little bit helps for convenience. So we've got toilet rooms, and then senior focused wellness. We had previously the multi-purpose activity room and wellness room, like with exercise equipment and then open exercise. These are two spaces. All of these spaces, these spaces are not in your present program. You do have some space that's used for massage and reflexology, and we added that into the program here. And then building support, like I mentioned before, we got additional toilet rooms and custodial space. We included in the program a family toilet. The term family toilet is more an indicator that it's a large enough restroom that if someone in a wheelchair or with a mobility aid, if someone needs assistance, you can go in and help them. Often we find that, I'll give a personal anecdote. My mother was in a wheelchair for a number of years, and often my father had to push her into the women's restroom. And some people were understanding and other people weren't. And so it's always helpful to have a restroom that allows people that need some assistance, their privacy and dignity. So we provided that in the program here. And then general building storage. There's seems to be never enough storage in a program or in a building. So those are, I'm going to zoom back out to a point where probably no one can read it because it's small on my screen. Those are the areas that we have in all all of the programs. The second program has all of those same types of spaces, but then on the senior-focused wellness, and then we added a pickleball, indoor pickleball court with space large enough for 6 courts and equipment for that. So that's really the big difference between the program with a gym and without a gym. It's the gym itself. And I'm going to keep motoring along until I am interrupted. So if anybody on the committee has a question, speak up. The image of you guys on my screen is teeny. So I wouldn't see a raised hand if you were trying to be polite.
If you can,
Concept 3 is the combination of those spaces.
Adam, I'm sorry, can you hang on just one moment?
Yes.
Is this, you looking for better visibility of this, or did you have a question, ma'am?
my question is, if you can't afford this program where you're adding these things that a lot of people want, have you considered going into phase 1, phase 2, phase 3?
We'll get to that in a little bit, but thank you. Yeah, that is something we'll certainly cover. Go ahead, Adam.
Okay. So the third, this concept is essentially, has all the same elements for the community center, or for the senior center, but adds elements for a community center that are highlighted kind of with this purple highlighter. And there's spaces, there's some additional administrative space for those staff members. There's additional meeting rooms in that program. And then a multi-sports court. So this is basketball, 2 basketball courts, 2 volleyball courts, or 6 pickleball courts could all fit in that one gymnasium with equipment storage for each of those. So again, these are growing incrementally. Then there's also a 5,000 square feet of space reserved for our youth recreation program. The last program, here we go. The last program is combining those and saying, okay, if we had the senior center, if you look at the square footage from the first senior center with a pickleball court, it was 41,000 square feet, and saying, all right, if we had 2 separate buildings, completely separate space, here's what that community center space might look like, and if we had 2 separate gymnasiums. Part of what drove this kind of exploration into a program was a concern for sharing space and not wanting, some individuals not being interested in sharing a gymnasium and wanting to make sure, okay, if we've got pickleball, we don't want it to be overrun by another program. So this is an option showing what that might look like if we had essentially 2 gymnasiums in the program. I can speak to cost of construction next if you'd like.
Yeah, let's go ahead and go through that, and then we'll come back and we'll go through all the questions I'm sure we're having in a minute.
Okay. So what we did, because we don't have a building designed, we're only working with square foot cost. What that means is we look up examples of projects we've worked on or other similar project types that we can compare and say, okay, the Greenville YMCA, not the pool zone, but the family zones, multi-purpose space, a gymnasium, and some administrative space. We identified what is the cost per square foot of that building. And let me zoom in here a little bit and said, if we put an estimate together for for bidding, if it was bid this year, I think this is actually a typo, but if it was bid this year with a square foot of the building, the estimated cost, the YMCA, Brendan Ozunian actually put together the estimates, so I misspoke. This is the cost for the YMCA. So they put together, based on actual bids and the square foot, which is in the range of your project. It's 32,000 square feet. And then if we escalate that cost up based on when your project is anticipated in 2026, it gives us a square foot cost, including all the fees and contingencies, again, with no design other than what they had, of around $473 per square foot. What that means then, with a spreadsheet, we can look at those program areas and the square foot, and then the cost associated with what those areas would be. So it helps to give a range of what the building might cost. If it was senior center only with no gym, if we're looking at 23,000 square feet, we're looking at 11 million and change. Up to, if we had senior center with 2 gyms, senior and community center with 2 gyms, up to 73,400 square feet, it could be as much as 34,700,000. The next sheet, some of you may be familiar with the Portage Senior Center. So this is senior exclusive. It's not a senior community, it's a senior center. It's got I would say all the features that your program has been looking for. Some of the areas are different sizes. It is a 2-story space. They have, I think, just 2 pickleball courts inside. So we're still talking apples to apples as far as type of spaces. It's a little bit higher end. It's a higher level of finish. If you look back at the previous project, some of the space is a pre-engineered structure, so it's a bit simplified. And if you look at the Portage project, there's some exposed structure, beams, and just a higher level of architectural finish in this space. I won't go through all the detail on that, but this project, if we escalate it to today's dollars and on your project, to build a building in this kind of fashion would be around $536 per square foot. So when we extrapolate that on the senior center only with no gym of 23,000 square feet, we're around 12,500,000. So I can go through, we can see on screen the range then, if you go from a senior center with no gym of 23,000 square feet, you're 12 million, and it goes up to around 40 million. So the committee, once we have a decision on the square footage that we would like to build from, it's pretty easy for us to look back and say, okay, if it's a building of this quality, we can expect around 536, that's a range with based on the quality here. And that tells us how much we can expect a project to cost. Any questions? I believe that the committee had these spreadsheets and the estimates before the meeting. But if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, so, thank you, Mr. Hopkins. We appreciate your walking us through all of those. I guess we'll start with the question that we posed previous to the presentation, which is probably one that we'll want to hear from our staff about, which is the location of our Parks and Recreation staff within the building. Tim or Courtney, do you want to weigh in on why that decision was made?
Yeah, so I mean, if we're going to a senior center and then community center in the future, or senior community center all at once, these staff members are gonna need to be in this building. You're already gonna have a minimum of director for senior center, programmer, and admin under the smallest of programming facilities. And so the question is, where do you break, if you're gonna split it, where's the break line, right? The offices are needed at some point when you get to the community center, and so for purposes of discussion, we decided to include them at this point. It's 800 square feet-ish that you could cut out if we decide not to move forward with this. Not a large amount in the grand scheme of things, but trying to, if the ultimate answer is a senior center only, idea is trying to bridge the gap between the two answers as best we can.
Okay, thank you. Did that answer the task force's question on the, yes?
I had one additional, just for clarification. How many current Parks and Rec staff are housed in the current senior center?
None.
Yeah, be careful.
I don't want to step on anyone's toes here, but the Parks and Rec largely is housed at our facility on Gaylord C. Smith Drive. At the senior center facility is Sherry Wisdom, the director of the facility, and she has a part-time assistant that is there.
So those are two positions, one full and one part-time, that are
Correct.
currently housed at the senior center now. So
Correct.
some of the positions that we're looking at as far as addition, there are currently staff housed in the senior center.
Correct.
Okay, just thank you for that.
Thank you. Yes, Member Steve.
I was looking at the lobby with seating for 6, and I'm trying to just visualize. We've got a vestibule, we go into the vestibule, and then we've got a reception desk, work area. What scenario would we have with people sitting in a lobby area waiting to come in?
Someone coming to a meeting and we're waiting for the director to come get them,
Or
someone
something
coming in
like
for an
that.
interview.
Okay,
They're waiting for
Waiting for transportation, yeah.
okay. I just wondered in practical terms what that area was going to be used for. Great, thank you.
You always try in Michigan to have a little bit of space near the entrance for
Yeah.
various reasons.
Yes, no, the double doors is essential.
Yes.
Okay. Other questions on the staff areas or, okay.
Not in the
Yes.
staff areas. Excuse me, I think it was about halfway down, Adam, there was, one of the line items was fireside seating area. I'm sorry if I missed that. What is fireside seating mean?
When we went through the previous design process, one of the things that was requested is, boy, it'd be nice if we had a gas fireplace where people could sit and talk. So that's kind of the idea, is that rather than just a gymnasium, a wide open space that if I guess I'll say this too. When we visited the current senior center, there's groups or clusters, and we saw a group. I want to say there was a group knitting. There was a group of people. We didn't interrupt. They were at some tables and chairs in one area. There was another group of people meeting, and so the idea here is that fireside seating area, that might be a cluster of seats with a focal point like you might have in a living room. And that kind of an environment is going to be a little bit different than maybe where you're playing cards, and the furniture might be different. So That whole zone, that's part of why they're set in, is that this is really grouped together. The hospitality or self-serve coffee would be easily accessible. Maybe it's not in a completely separate room, but it's adjacent to the activity and conversation lounge.
So that actually, that brings up a good question. Those three that are inset there, those are themselves separate square footages. So it's not that the whole room is 1,100, but 450 is for the self-serve coffee hospitality. These are basically, it's one big space, but it's, you know, it's internally subdivided, if not actually subdivided into those 4 square footages.
Correct.
Okay.
And again, we have not designed the facility. This is saying, these are kind of, if you think of your home and you think about a dining room, an open plan, contemporary floor plan on a house, you might have a living room, a living area next to a dining area that might be open to a kitchen. And those spaces, they might be in an open plan where you can see and communicate with each other, but you might be in the dining space, you might be watching a game or sitting at soft seating. So yes, they're separate spaces within the larger. They might be, depending on the layout of the final design, they may have an alcove, they may be configured in a way to give more privacy in one area or another. This is just the start of how we might organize space.
Did that answer your question, Member Robertson?
Thank you.
Yes, Member Hood.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. My apologies for missing the last few meetings. I was out on a leave with a rotator cuff repair, so please forgive me if I ask something that was already covered by the committee. So question about outside the facility in the program. Was it ever talked about a walking area or a sitting area for the seniors to build that into? I know our current program per se has a seated area and a short loop the seniors can walk. I didn't know if that was something that came up and was wanted. I just didn't see it in any of the programs. I wanted to make sure it was either talked about or people decided maybe it wasn't a priority. So I was just curious.
I would say that it was mentioned, it was brought up. Part of it we're waiting for site selection will help us understand what amenities might already be on the site and what we need to develop. So you're accurate in saying it is not listed specifically on this sheet, but there's also been discussion of possibly having a garden space outside, and that may or may not necessarily. Frankly, it's tied to square footage of what we need to have dollars to pay to build or to develop. So certainly if we had, say, an outdoor gazebo or we wanted a paved path, then we would need to make sure that that was accounted for in the total project and the cost. So I talked a lot to say, yes, it was brought up, but you're right, it's not specifically listed on the program lists.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to briefly touch on the notion of a phased approach. I know that's been something that's been discussed a fair amount in some of the communications that we've received. So specifically with relating to the costing of this proposal, that's listed toward the end here when you showed us the Portage and the Greenville comparison points. These are based on one mobilization, one construction, and so on and so forth.
Correct.
When you are looking at doing a phased approach where you're building this essentially 2, maybe 3 times, can someone give me an idea of the impact that might have on the overall budget?
Adam, do you want to flip up to the, not this one, but the other cost example? One page up. Yeah, so if you look at the Greenfield YMCA, it's a fair example that's 1 year, essentially difference in bidding there, and they've already got a $30 escalator built in. That's not to take into account any other changes, that's just a flat.
That's inflationary.
We know it's gonna go up by that much. Not taking into account the fact that you're gonna have to design, your A&E is gonna be not quite double, but you're gonna have to design it twice because you're only designing part of the building at once, and then you're gonna design the other part of the building, and then you're gonna mobilize twice. And there are substantial increased costs. What that number is, that's not quite a 10% increase, essentially year to year. I would start at 10% and go up from there. The difference between, we don't know what's gonna happen. The difference between somebody that bid something in 19 versus bid something in 21 is astronomical in recent years, as some of our friends can attest to.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess suffice it to say there are economies of doing this all at once in terms of actually, getting the bidding, the architectural work, and eventually the mobilization and construction work. Would that be, I guess, a fair assessment based on that information?
Yeah, I would agree. Adam, I assume you would as well.
Yes, absolutely.
It's not to say we can't do it, but we do need to be eyes wide open about what choosing to move forward with a phased approach means. And so I wanted to lay that out since we've been hearing a fair amount about that from our members of the public, and just wanted to be aware of some of the consequences of those decisions. Yes.
Could you refresh my memory? What was the build-out cost of Yonkers?
You're really testing my memory.
I just knew you would have that at the
23?
fingertips.
I want to say it was, no, I don't want to be
Like
wrong.
70 million
I think that was with operating.
with operating?
That's assuming 20 years of operating
Okay,
costs.
with operating, okay.
I believe we came in at around 2 million per year in operating.
Correct.
So it would be somewhere like 35 million in build out.
Okay. Thank you.
Please don't quote me on that as an exact
Oh, I'm
figure.
gonna
but
publish
it was, it was something like that, I believe.
Okay, thank you.
I wanted to also make a point too, in terms of the phase-out approach. We talked about this, I believe, in the December meeting. It would also be the duplication of, maybe from the exterior perspective, potentially a parking lot needing to be added onto, but also from an internal perspective, HVAC, electrical, all these systems that you could have centralized. Now you potentially have two of them, and how you kind of integrate those, also going into that factor of cost, in addition to just square footage increase.
Sure. Yes.
And also, it was brought up earlier in public remarks about, are we looking at available school buildings? It's my understanding that there is not an available school building that we would renovate into a senior center. I believe that was discussed at one of our really early meetings. Has something changed there?
No, in fact, both of our school administrators
Yeah,
are
or
here.
here. I
And I won't put them on the spot by asking.
I will.
asking directly.
Just did.
I will, as far as I know.
Not by 2026. I mean, if there's potential for a school building to be available much later than that, 2030, but not
Yeah.
2026.
Yeah, I assume that's,
Yeah.
we're in a similar position.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And we did, when the task force went through and did our site review, we did look at the Wardcliff site as an initial proposal, and this is exactly the same thing that we heard, at that meeting a couple of months ago, which was that was not a site that's available to us, and so it was more or less rejected for that reason. And so, yes, we did go through and do a very rigorous overview of various sites that were available to us and those that weren't. And I understand, it's been a long couple of months for all of us. It's a lot to keep track of. But we did focus in on two specific sites that we are looking to pursue. One being at the Central Fire Station, over on Central Park, just down the road. And the second being the driving range on Grand River at 1410 Grand River. The driving range we do not own, we would have to purchase. And our staff are working on that. And if you weren't here for the beginning of the meeting, the update that we got was that it was looking increasingly unlikely that that site would be available to us. And so we don't know that officially for sure, but it's pointing that direction. And so likelier than not, we'll be hearing by our next meeting that we're going to likely need to focus on the fire station property. Yes.
And could you remind me in the community, I know we have the one grant, but the funding source for this one would be a millage?
Eventually, if it exceeds what we are able to contribute.
Contribute, right.
And based on the numbers that we see here, it
Yeah.
very likely would. I mean, the reality is that we have the $5 million grant
Right.
from the state. And Ms. O'Kelly is correct in pointing out that that needs to be spent by September of 2026 in order for us to have and use that. But any additional costs would have to be covered by some combination of township existing general fund dollars, millage dollars, federal or county grants, which may become more challenging now than they had originally
Become
been.
non-existent.
Yeah.
So, excuse me, so maybe just point in asking is I know there's escalation, and anytime you have to, stage and add on, it becomes inherently more inefficient, but I also think the committee needs to consider what the voters' palpability is for a millage and how much, especially inside of, like, we just passed a $275 million bond in Okemos. It was a no tax increase millage, but we know we're planning on, that's not going to meet all our needs. We're going to have to go back. So we're also looking at, we don't want to be in a competition with the township over this in terms of how much appetite is there for increased taxes and millage across our community. And I don't know if Hazlett's going to go for a millage anytime soon, but I just don't want to unintentionally put us in a position where we're competing for the same dollars.
Yeah, we'll be in a similar situation to what you were in a few years ago in terms of, no millage increase bond measure. We've got some aging buildings, so definitely part of the conversation in the next 3 years, so.
So while it may cost more, it may be potentially more passable to do a lesser amount and stage it out, just a consideration.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, we are a body that will simply make a recommendation to the township board. The township board will eventually be voting on whether or not to put something on the ballot. But it is good to be cost conscious, certainly, and we'll want to be aware of the entire landscape. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yes. Quick clarification on the monies for the grant. Is it an expenditure in 2026 or an encumbrance?
Expenditure.
It's an expenditure. Okay.
Correct.
However, if we choose to move forward, understanding that there will likely be some kind of millage no matter what, that would be likely on the ballot in August of this year. And I don't foresee any issue with being able to expend that $5 million prior to a full year later.
Oh, absolutely. We'll be able to expend the dollars in advance. And I just want to.
We're not in the danger zone yet in that regard.
I did just want to circle back on the Yonkers question. I was able to find the email. Last estimate that we got was 23.8 million just for interior renovation. There's about $6 million of interest built into the model and 40 million plus in operations over 20 years, which is where that $80 million comes to. There were a few other things floating around.
And did that include having to replace the roof and the HVAC and all that?
Yep, we did a very deep dive on that building.
I should say. All right, any other questions? Yes, Mr. Bagnozzi.
I'm asking for direction on how we're going to proceed. When do you want? I guess there's two ways we can go. We can pick through, just for argument's sake, this option senior center, no gym, or we can kind of go through all of them at a higher level and see if we can rule out any options at that point and then not spend time chasing the details.
So,
I'm looking for direction.
yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think as a general reminder, our mission is to present two things at the end of this process, right? One that's a senior center only option and one that's a senior and community center option. So I think it would be wise for us to sort of bifurcate it down the middle and say, let's take a look at the senior option, see is there one that's, one that we throw out or one that we work on, or do we want to sort of find an amalgamation of the two? And then we can, once we made that decision, go through and sort of talk about the specifics line by line. And then we'll do the same thing with the community center. So if we'd like, let's start with the senior center. We have two senior center options that were put before us this evening. One that has no gym and one that has a senior pickleball gym. Mr. Bagnozzi.
I cannot justify the option with the pickleball gym, okay? As under this umbrella, my math, if it's good, shows that it's about 9.7 million extra for the pickleball gym. Okay. It's hard to justify that much money for something that has one dedicated purpose. So that's where I stand on that.
Others, do you have any thoughts on that?
I'll take the opposite view. I don't think we need, was it 6 courts? I don't think that, I think maybe we could reduce that, but I would think if this is well designed, it could be pickleball, volleyball, and basketball. And it doesn't have to be just pickleball if it's designed properly.
The question, I guess, would be, is that something that our senior community is interested in, is those things?
We've heard that the courts are full.
Yes.
And the seniors are using courts, and there's no indoor court, is there? And I realize as we're looking, we're going, well, what is what we want and what is what we need? And we're balancing those two things. But I think making an active recreation area for seniors is an important thing. And if I had to choose between a ping pong table and a place to do that, that's something that you could easily do in other areas. But I would at least have some space for that. I don't know that we need 6 courts. I think we could certainly reduce it, but that's just my thought.
Sure. Yes.
I guess to respond to that, I think you're talking about option 3, and that's why I would eliminate this option.
And just do it as part of the community center, as a shared gym space?
Yes.
Okay.
That's what
That's where I was.
And I would go for that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would go for that too.
There's just so much,
Yeah,
they're so close in design, is kind of, is that the point you were making, that they, for the money,
yeah.
you get more space with that option 3.
Then I would concur with that. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do I see nodding heads? Yes, Member Fair.
I just in thinking through it, I'm inclined to lean towards, except for efficiencies in a senior center, if anything is above like a program addition or something expanded, then it should fall to the community center. That's just where I'm leaning.
So can you restate that?
If we're going to just do a senior center, then I think it should be pretty much what we have now. And if we do more than that, I believe that's where it falls more to a community center, or we're working towards a phased or an expanded approach. I guess in my own mind, I'm not sure that I can justify that additional, even though it's very worthwhile, for just a senior center if we are not able to include more than that.
I think one of the difficulties about this is balancing cost with feeling really stupid 10 years from now that we didn't do something that we could have done now. And that's where I struggle, I still remember when they built the new Okemos High School. Everybody in town was calling it the Taj Mahal. And we got that high school built, and then everybody else passed a bond issue and built them even bigger. And lots of other things. And I want to make sure that we allow for growth. If we keep all the programming the same and we don't add people to that senior center, and it is not attracting seniors in the community, then we don't need more space. And I would think that maybe with a little bit of space to work in, we could add a little bit of programming that might make it kind of one of those little gyms in our community.
Yeah, Mr. Hood.
I think that's a terrific point, and I would ask Mr. Hopkins, just in terms of, I know with the district, we've shared similar concerns, and we've, with our architects, we've designed the buildings to thinking about future add-ons, so where the air conditioning vents end, where it would be easy to envision putting additions or other things we might need in the future. So if you could just speak to that in this process, is that a possibility with a build of this type?
Absolutely possible. So oftentimes we have to build projects in phases. And so having an idea in advance where you would want to grow, whether it's a gymnasium, or if we say we would like to have more large group space for exercise, then we plan it in the floor plan. We may not detail it, but have a space that this is where the future multi-purpose room is going to go, or this is where the future music room is going to go. So those things, yes, we would absolutely plan ahead. And I would come back to and agree with the assertion that the program area that's shown now with no gymnasium is certainly larger than your current facility. We've also received the communication from the communities, from the senior center, that said, this is what we have today, and this is all we need for a phase for our senior center. Everything else is community center. I mean, that is something that we can look at as well and say, here's what there is today, and anything in addition could be part of a senior center, whether that's a separate phase or just a separate portion of the building, that the building is designed with zones of focused for seniors and focused more for community. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
I think to that point, I mean, I don't want to upset the apple cart here, but it'd be interesting to see, I would say helpful to see this type of a layout for maybe program 1 and program 3 to then go through and almost highlight or underline what we currently have, so that we can see what those extras are kind of just right in your face.
So it's difficult to compare simply because we're using a space now that's been lovingly used, but is a hand-me-down in the end. We've sort of adapted to the space. We've adapted to the space as opposed to the space being adapted to what we want. If you're looking sort of, the question is, how does sort of option A compare to the existing, just as a baseline, right? What you've added is the majority of the administrative offices, the meeting room space at 4,300, and the senior focused wellness space are really the three main additions. I mean, there's nits and bits here and there, but those are sort of the three main adds to get to the number you're at in terms of square footage. The way this would be laid out would obviously be more efficient than the existing, because it's new construction, right? We lay it out the way we think it's going to work best for us. But roughly, so those are roughly the meeting rooms, the senior focused, and sort of that activity area are the big things that are new adds, really.
Right.
Just clarification here. Adam, just clarification. The places where you're drawing arrows is exactly what I was looking at.
Yep,
Because we've got a large space now that is serving all of those functions.
right.
Right, and now we've got the multi-purpose room for 40, which is 720 square feet, the conversation area, which is the 1,100 square feet, the multi-purpose senior focused area, 1,300, and then up on top, we had the multi-purpose room for 2,100 square feet. So we've got 2,000,
Yes.
3,000, 4,000, almost 5,000 square feet, whereas our current building, it's one room for all those things.
Right.
Is that correct?
Your current building is right around this one space that kind of everything opens into, is that primary space. So all the areas that I pointed to with the little line, those are areas that you don't presently have today. And so the large multi-purpose space with a flat floor, this is larger. You wouldn't be able to get, I don't believe, comfortably 120 people in that space at tables and chairs for, say, a large luncheon. So, yes, all of these spaces, these are not exactly, apples to apples comparison, but there's one set of toilet rooms, not two. You do not have these activity spaces today. The reflexology massage that's done today is in the same as a small group room. So really that's an add in this program as well. The billiards and table tennis are in that main space. They're in that big open area. So these are the areas that have grown. And we can certainly, if the committee is looking for us to kind of dial us back to what you have today, we can do that and show that. But these are spaces that, as we met with community groups, we met out in the pavilion at the Township Hall last summer. We have met multiple times with the senior groups. These are the areas that we heard were requested, and so they found their way into the program.
Yeah, thank you. And certainly we were part of one of those design sessions here back in November, I believe.
Correct.
And so a lot of this does sound familiar in terms of the asks. But this is the winnowing portion, as I mentioned at the outset of the meeting. And so the 17,000 program square footage of total is a bit higher than what we've seen, what we've got in our current facility. And so, I think the big question we need to ask ourselves is, do we want a multi-purpose room that's 120 and one that's 40? Both. Do we want a third one that's focused on wellness and exercise?
I'd be curious to know, because everybody has talked about the current size at 1,100 square feet. And this was, 11,000, yes, thank you. And then we're up to 23,000. Is there some number in between those two that people would be more comfortable with?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, right? And it comes with monetary, ramifications too. I think what our staff is telling us by maintaining its inclusion in all 4 programs is that we need to be prepared for the want of the staff to have additional programming offices for their staff in the building. And so, we're looking at an extra couple hundred square feet there. But then, from a programming perspective, how much more do we have an appetite for in this new build that's senior center only? For me, just a nice round number feels like 14 or 15,000 would be a more palatable square footage number. And then we're talking about, it's challenging, right? Because this is 17,000 of program area plus then 6,000 of basically hallway space. And so or at least that's
And
how.
mechanical.
And walls, yeah, right, but can't really get away from all of that. Yes.
I think it's important, important to note that when we say 11,500 for the existing senior center, the real apples to apples comparison is to the program area subtotals. Because we don't have, we don't have the
mechanical.
at this 6,000 square foot level.
Right.
It's sort of absorbed in other parts of the building.
Sure.
Okay. The other observation I have, sorry for losing my voice. I count through the senior center, no gym. I find 5 different group rooms. If we're looking to shrink, I would start there.
Yeah. I think that's something that, obviously, we as a task force, and it's me who sits on the board, we've heard a lot about need for additional meeting space. But perhaps it's better served if that appears in more of the community center, senior center model, to have that volume of room space than it would if we're looking at just a senior center only. So in that way, for the senior center proposal, I agree with you. I think that there's actually probably more meeting room space than we may need, given all the other things that are included in this original proposal. Yes.
I was wondering, what costs can we incur without a millage? Do we know that number?
That's up to the full board to make a determination on.
Okay, so we don't know at this time. I guess my thinking is if we go for a millage, we should do it once. Not go for in addition to the senior center and then in addition for a community center.
I think, without speaking for my colleagues, I think that would probably be the course of action that would be the most palatable, would be to dip into that well only one time.
Okay.
So just quick math and listening to the conversation here, if we were to essentially eliminate the meeting room at 4340 plus the factor of common space and knock off about 1,800 square feet of the administrative offices, that gets you to right around 15,000 square feet all in.
I'm sorry, it was, which meeting room are you talking?
Take out the meeting rooms category.
The whole thing.
Writ large.
So
about 1,800 square feet of the administrative offices, that would get you to about 15,000 square feet.
I think if it were me putting the red pen to paper, it would likely be the 40-person room, and then the secondary activity room and the small group meeting room. We're not going to get to 4,000 square feet editing that way. However, I do know that the one thing that seemed to be asked for at every one of the design meetings is room for the jazzercise. And that was a very large space requirement that was being asked for. And I think that 120-person multipurpose room, that was the intent that would be in that area. And so I think looking at the other spaces would be more prudent, because you can do a lot with that 120-person room that I think you could also do in those smaller rooms, but I think the one space achieves that. So if it were me, I think if trying to edit it out, I would pull out the other activity rooms, leaving the big one, and do that. Yes.
I agree. I think again, one lesson we're learning in Okemos with our bond work the last 5 or 6 years is flexible use of space. So a space that can be envisioned to be one thing, but then with flexible furniture and other things be something else. And our seniors are great at that right now because they have one space. But I could see the potential of that multipurpose room serving, you put the right type of floor in, it could serve multiple purposes besides meeting. It could serve the jazzercise, it could serve, who knows, you could do indoor maybe shuffleboard, who knows? But I would want the architects to design some of these spaces through the lens of how could you multi-use some of the spaces to kind of shrink that overall footprint.
And I think if you look at those other 3 rooms, that's a total of about 1,600 square feet. That gets us down to about 15.5-ish in terms of the program area. If that's the number we're trying to bring down to that 15,000, we're getting closer there. And maybe there's maybe we can nip and tuck and find a way to pull a few more 100 square feet out to get us down to something like that. Not saying that that's the answer, but that was just what felt like a comfortable amount that's a little bit bigger than what we've got now. Yes.
And I can't speak to, the township has to help me understand whether it's a want or a need for those township offices to be there. That wasn't in my original, programming thought. And I really want to lean on the township of, what is the need for that space? And then I think our taxpayers are going to ask, well, what's happening with the other space now that's empty? And the one thing I've learned in my time in Okemos is our taxpayers are so generous about supporting our schools and community if we can tell them what we need versus what we want and why. So I would just want to make sure that that is clear as to the why. And there may be some efficiencies with staffing built into that if you're moving people over, because you need to supervise. Remember, the more spaces you have too, the more supervision and places there are to clean, places there are to make sure our seniors are safe. As they're an aging population, want to make sure they're safe and there's supervision if someone were to fall in one of these rooms and there's not cameras or IT or staff there to help. Right now it's, in a sense, nice because it's community, they're all together, so it's pretty obvious if there's an issue, just trying to keep everybody safe and think about that. So I'm wondering if we could get space from that, but again, I don't want to speak on if it's a need from the township and not a want because of the, there's efficiencies if you're moving staffing to a place where the people are at.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for Director Wazinski fully, but I feel like if it were my department to run, I think the senior community center model, it would be a must, right? Because there's a lot of programming that occurs out of that community center that our existing Parks and Rec specialists would be doing,
exactly,
right?
yeah.
And
But for the senior center.
and that includes, youth areas and the gym and all that.
Right.
And having everyone under one roof makes sense from an efficiency perspective, especially as a supervisor trying to do that. Now, is it a need versus a want in a senior center only model? That I'm going to leave to Director Wazinski.
That's great summary.
I could go both ways. I would say it's more of a want, and the reason it's more of a want is we have outgrown our space where we are. So this is an opportunity. Right now, we've got, 3 people in an office, sharing one office. And then we have seasonal workers come in. So right now, we are a very cozy family in a very small space.
We know all about that.
And we do fine with that. But if we were to expand it all, we have no space. And quite honestly, we're already on top of each other. So given the opportunity to have additional space for our staff, our current staff, would be certainly a want.
Sure.
Great. So you wouldn't be emptying the other building necessarily, be in addition to?
It would be moving to another building.
So be moving everyone, not splitting?
The idea would be all of the Parks and Rec staff, but land stewardship would stay.
Got it, okay.
Within the service center because
Makes
it's more of a service type of.
It does, I will say, and maybe one of the Tims can speak to this, it does have an additional domino effect down the line of if Parks moves out of that building, it gives us an opportunity to alleviate some other staffing
Issues you have,
pileups.
sure, yeah.
in
And that just
other
helps, that
offices.
helps, yeah.
So it's not going to turn into vacant space.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No, we'll find ways
I
to
think that's
fill the
helpful for the
space.
community here,
Yeah.
Well, and I think there's some advantage in having that additional staff there just from keeping the senior center open. Right now, we've got staff so lean that if somebody has a family emergency, for example, They need clothes. And because we just don't have the staffing over there, and having that additional staff there might give us a little bit of better hour,
Yeah,
better hours
coverage,
on
yeah.
that.
Yes.
I'm trying to understand under senior focused wellness, the multi-purpose activity room. Are those functions that could be accommodated in the multi-purpose 120 room?
Yeah, Adam, was this a holdover from the first design, which is like the low-impact exercise facility? Was that the intent of this?
Yes, so to give a little clarity, the spaces here under senior focused wellness, if you think about how you might design a space for jazzercise or for yoga or for other physical activities, you want better ventilation, a higher rate of ventilation. You might have a different flooring type. You might have a different sound system based on the type of activity for physical activity for exercise, where the multi-purpose space, so this space up here was envisioned more as a presentation and instructional, or you could have a travel log. So more of a presentation type space, or a place where we're going to have a luncheon and get together. And that's why we had the warming kitchen connected to it. So we can have a lunch brought in, have a presentation at tables and chairs. That's a different type of activity than step aerobics. And as a result, what we did is we separated those spaces and then would design the space specifically for the type of activity in the space. Can you do step aerobics in the same space? Absolutely. And you're doing it today in your facility. Pretty much all the activities are in that main space. And so, yes, that's why there's kind of wellness space. These rooms would certainly be designed with different finishes than the meeting rooms. Those would be different acoustic treatments. So the spaces are just a different type of space. But if we needed to eliminate, say, the wellness rooms, we can certainly still have those activities go on in the large group space. It just, one, needs to be scheduled and coordinated so that times don't overlap. And then also, we need to make sure we have space for tables and chairs to be moved out of the room to have the exercise. So again, that's a long answer to say these are separated spaces. So because they're different types of activities that require a different type of environment, if we're creating two separate type of environments. If we need to focus that down, narrow it up, then yes, we can do that in one space up here, one multi-purpose space, and eliminate some of the other ones.
Adam, if you would, is it possible in the design of this to have a subdividable multi-purpose room if you take that 2,100 square feet, you could, put those dividing walls that could be, making that into 2 or 3 spaces if needed, right?
Yes, that's certainly possible.
It's possible, that's not in here.
Everything's a trade-off. The folded partitions that have good acoustic properties are expensive, and they have to be maintained, but they do give you the opportunity to subdivide a space and make it smaller. And as long as similar type of activities, if you try to run an exercise class next to a quiet meeting, that might be a challenge with just a folding partition between the two. But it certainly gives you the flexibility of having a large space that then can be subdivided down into smaller spaces.
Sure. Thank you. Mr. Bagnozzi.
You beat me to that one. Looking at senior focused wellness, it's showing 1,300 square feet spaces. Any feasibility of those being shared?
Certainly. The intent here is, this was group exercise. The first one was kind of a wide open room for group exercise. The second one was intended to have equipment. So a treadmill, bicycles, machines that are specifically designed for seniors to use for exercise versus a open space. So, and that equipment does not move. Once it's set up, it's not something that gets easily moved in and out for regular use. So I would say it's kind of an either or. They could be combined, but then what I would say is then your multi-purpose space up here, the meeting room becomes that exercise space.
Okay, understand.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
I'm curious, back to the discussion about the community band. What are we doing in the way of arts programming currently at our senior center? Do we have painting classes, for example, or do we have any kind of music going on down there? I've looked through things and I just don't remember seeing much of that.
Director Wazinski?
Yeah, I have it in here. There's a lot of different programming.
Yeah, and I'm particularly interested in the arts field there.
Yeah, let's see. There's not much that's regular. However, I do know that our manager, Sherry, will bring in every once in a while some new programming, but arts is not necessarily a regular activity.
Yeah.
No, it is. Yeah, we have a weekly, we have until recently, a weekly painting class, and we have regular crafts, classes, making jewelry, making Christmas ornaments at Christmas time, and so forth. We have a book club.
Yeah, I knew that.
And
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I thought that was an intriguing discussion there.
Yeah, Michelle, I do have the year calendar here. And I don't see all of what Barbara's mentioning, but I couldn't contest it.
I can look at my newsletter.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Other discussion?
Yeah.
Yes.
So just a thought, and maybe Mr. Hopkins can speak to this. I know we've struggled with the same thing in the Oklahoma schools with designing our buildings and trying to fit it into a budget. And I've said to the architects, well, this is what I pay you for, do the squeeze and come back with a proposal.
Yeah.
And they have said, okay, instead of 1,000 square foot room here, you can really make this work. So then instead of just cutting program, you're getting more efficient with the program you have, from luxurious program to more standard program. So I would just pose that question instead of us just slashing to say, do a squeeze for us. We want to see a 15% reduction in the square footage and come back to us and talk to us about the pros and cons of what that new square footage is before we just kind of eliminate some of those programs.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful because we could be sitting here all night with sharpening our pencils. Yeah, I think that is probably a worthwhile pursuit if that's what the task force is interested in seeing in February here. Yeah, we'll nip and tuck, I think, with the general idea perhaps being that we have perhaps a bit of meeting space bloat. And so I think that where we've come to is a pretty good spot to direct our consultants to go back and maybe take their, to get their pencil sharpeners out. Mr. Schmidt, you had something to add there?
Yeah, so just in terms of playing this out, since we have 2 meetings left, essentially, of the task force, and I'd like to give Adam and team some time to start actually laying this out on a property, right? So we have some concepts by March that we're working on. So my suggestion would be, at this point, it sounds like there's some pencil sharpening needs to happen if we can get the the program, minus the mechanical, plumbing, electrical factor, down to around 15,000. We're going to be more comfortable with that, is what I'm hearing. There's some things that we can take out, right? And generally then those changes translate over on the community center side as well, that wherever we can get some benefit there, we can get it on the community center side as well. So to continue this two-path and to give Adam time to get a conceptual layout together to show you how it would work as a phase one, phase two, what I would like to do is give them until the March meeting to get that conceptual layout done. Once, in the next day or two here, we tell them the site, which I think we know where we're going at this point. And we take the February meeting to dive into the operational costs, so we don't leave that for the last minute. Because although we were prepared to talk about personnel discussion tonight, we've been at this for almost 2 hours already. It'd probably be beneficial for us to then get all of our thoughts together on operations and maintenance and get into the numbers in a little more detail at the next meeting, and then sort of bring it all together in March for the last hurrah, if you will.
So, Member Vagnozzi.
That, what Tim is proposing makes sense to me. I think we probably should, in fairness to Tim, the consultants and staff, we should probably give them either option 3 or option 4 as the combined plan.
Yeah.
We should, if we accomplish nothing else tonight.
Those are tasks really to come up with.
Nothing else additional.
Yeah.
And I'm more than willing to start it off and saying, I struggle to swallow option 4.
Okay. Other members, yes.
I just wanted to reinforce that as we're reducing spaces, as the architect is, that the idea of the flexible space is really important. I know we've done that with our church, and it's amazing what you can use those spaces for. And the second thing I was thinking of is duplication of services we already have in the community. So just for an example, the wellness equipment room would be great if under budget. Right across the street from where this is Planet Fitness for $10 a month. There are tons and tons of seniors that are over there. So I'm not sure from my standpoint that that's a good use of the space. So those were the only two things.
Yeah, and it was remarkable that they were able to pitch that and have the mall be okay with that idea, considering that they're a tenant of that. And we were looking at the Yonkers space, but yeah, I generally agree,
That's a
right?
good
We
thought.
also don't want to be competing with one of our local businesses either. And so I think that's worth considering when we look at, that wellness room as well, the equipment room specifically. So to look at the senior and community center options, I agree with the notion that I think the 2 gym option is a lot. Especially if we are saying that the senior gym is not included in the senior center only option that we're looking to move forward with. Now, the option 3, as it was presented to us, includes a multi-sport gym, which has, now, I guess, Adam, could you clarify, this is not all at the same time, 2 basketball, 2 volleyball, 6 pickleball. This is can be used for any one of those 3 purposes at any time, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
But it is still 2 basketball courts at a time or 6 pickleball courts, and that's nothing to sneeze at. That's 2 and 6 more than we have today. And so I think that certainly is quite a bit. I think as we nip and tuck on the senior, I don't actually think that the square footage of option 3 is wildly out of sync with even the numbers that Mr. Bowlby, who was here this evening, shared with us, right? The program area is just under $1 per, $1 or 1 square foot per person. 1 square foot per person. in the community. And so I actually think that the total size is reasonable. And so I think if we look at, let's sort of shift some of the things that we're nipping and tucking out of the senior-only proposal and move those into the senior community center proposal, or keep them in the senior community center proposal, but put them on the community center side. I think that's a reasonable approach, right? Like, I think, because when we have a community center, now we are saying, hey, we want these meeting spaces that are available to the community to come in and take advantage of, if there's a small ensemble that wants to rehearse, right, or that kind of thing. Do we feel, is there agreement, or am I on an island about the fact that the square footage actually doesn't seem unreasonable in that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think what you outlined is very succinct, and
Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense based on our conversation and the comments that have come forward with those two options.
Okay, yes.
The only maybe contrast I would offer for option 3 is that when another model is kind of redone on this, the nip and tuck version of option 1, I would be curious personally to see what a nip and tuck version of option 3 would look like, just to see if a 20% reduction in operating square footage. Okay, I didn't think about it that way. Maybe we can save some here, which means dollars saved here as well.
Yeah, and I think that's going to naturally come when Adam puts pencil to paper here. Is, he's going to lay out, like we've always said, sort of this is the Voltron approach. A and B and A plus B, right? So as he lays out the senior center and makes those nip and tuck things, how that then blends into the community center, it's naturally going to play off of it. If this space was changed over here, and now as you extend this hallway, well, okay, when this wall gets knocked out, we can make it what it was originally planned. So I think from a design perspective, it gives them a little flexibility to go, okay, how do we reimagine this? Should part 2 happen, or if we do it all at once, what does it look like then?
A question for me. Are we in agreement that if we go to whatever option 3 looks like, there's going to be dedicated senior area that's not going to be absorbed into the community center? It's going to be dedicated senior.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I just want to make
And
sure.
I think that's in the intent of maintaining those green barred areas.
I thought so
in option 3, yes.
And I concur, and thank you, because I wanted to say the same thing. I think the seniors have expressed the concern that, they want a place that's theirs. Like, how often do you have a place in a community that belongs to our seniors, our elders, the people that, we respect, that have built this community, put their blood, sweat, and tears into building Meridian Township to be what it is. So I'd like to see in our conceptual design, and I know we don't go down to the blueprint version, nor should we yet, but thought put out that makes the senior center feel in an option 3 that it's its own entity. And that it's not absorbed, a classroom here, a classroom there, that it's, and I believe our architects can do that with what's there. But I support the option 3. I think the 2 gyms is too much. With a caveat too, that again, the way we program those gyms could also honor our seniors with the way we approach the allocation of space.
Yeah, well, and that'll be a question for Director
Exactly.
Wazinski as she and the senior center director work together to.
But they got to design it so it feels, and it could also maybe even look separate, but be part of the same,
Yeah, and in fact, I was going to point out the other thing, that it may not be an economy of space, but I do wonder if we can explore, as we're doing site layout, the possibility of a secondary entrance that is just into the senior center. And then having the community center have its own entry area as well. I think that will also help to make a physical and mental distinction between the 2 areas. And
I think that would be valued by our seniors,
I think so. So if we could have that be explored in the layout of the building, I think that would be helpful, Adam. So essentially, what we're asking for, it sounds like, just to summarize, because I love to do that, is essentially for you to come back, Adam, in March with 3 versions of what we're looking at here. The first being Plan 1, with a pencil sharpened version and laid out on the Central Fire Station site, senior center only. Plan 3, with all the modifications that we described basically at the size that it's being presented here in the Plan 3 program. And then a pencil sharpened reduction version of that as well, to see if we can squeeze 10 to 15% out of that, both as a cost savings and also just as a result of the work that you're doing on the senior center only version. Does that sound like a decent encapsulation of where we're at?
I think Adam had a question.
Adam, you have a question?
Well, you said 3 things. One is a senior only on the fire, on the property adjacent to the fire station.
Yep. With pencil sharpened to 10 to 15% less, yep.
Right. And then I also heard basically the community, the senior and community center combined, which is kind of the program 3.
Mm-hmm.
What's our middle with a reduction of 10 to 15%?
So that's actually 2 things that we're looking for, right? Program 3, more or less as is, and then also the pencil sharpened version of that.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I would say too that as when you look at the 3 together, here's the example where we have both the senior and community center. If we are penciling out a little bit on the senior focused wellness, maybe these spaces are eliminated in the senior only, and then that might be part of that 10% that goes away in the community center. So we'd still have multi-purpose space, we'd still have community space, but maybe some of that wellness gets reduced. So I think I understand. We're looking for a very tight senior only program, and then a senior and community that has both of those features combined, and then the last is maybe it's this full program with all the features in this 3rd level.
The other thing that I would just ask, because I've been meaning to bring this up because I didn't see this in any of the community center plans. It appears as though the raised platform multi-purpose room it's included in the senior center, which I think is right. But if that is intended to be a room that is dedicated senior space, which I agree that it probably should be, then we don't have a raised platform meeting room for the community center as well. And one of the things that interested me was, a lecture or a dance recital or something like that with a more or less a raised platform or a stage of some kind. I think that that would be a valuable community center asset as well. So I see that there's a 100-person multipurpose room in Plan 3. I wonder if there's a way to include a platform there as well that could be used for those kinds of uses as well.
Sure.
Yes.
Just one, I think the summary was wonderful. Just one clarification. Trying to envision contingency planning like the what ifs and that flexible planning of the sites for the future. So would it also be in option 1, senior center only, but designing the site so it could have potential also future uses? The reason I say that is if you design it to be a senior center only,
right,
then later you decide to do something, you've already boxed yourself out with the design. And I know some thought may be, and I don't want to speak for the township trustees being appropriate, but in August you go for, you go for the home run. If people say no, then you have a fallback plan to run by in November at election before, can you take it twice to the voters if the first is no? they're no on both, so let's go back to the senior center one, and we already have a plan that we can build on later if we have options. So just a thought.
So I guess in the site layout,
Yes,
senior center with room for growth.
yes, yes.
And that's been their direction from the start.
Okay, good.
We need a layout where I can, with a straight face, stand in front of the board and say, we can build this, or we can build them both, but we could eventually always build them
Exactly.
both.
Yeah, right, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you. Yes.
One thing I just wanted to, it doesn't have to be formal, but a refresher on too, with Mr. Opsimer, one of our early meetings, had gone through all of the sites and had talked about the building space that was available for each of them. I just don't simply remember the fire station location, how big it can suit.
We have enough space there to accommodate what we're proposing.
Even if it, hypothetically, if we went with the 55,000 square foot with parking lot, sidewalks, all that good stuff. But
Yes.
Okay.
It's be bigger than it looks.
Is
Yeah,
it 10
exactly.
acres?
It goes back pretty far, even outside the
It's deeper,
floodplain.
that's the,
There's a lot
it's
of
deeper
woods
than
there,
you
yeah.
think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good question.
Anything else? All right, we're pushing up on the MSU game now. So all the sports fans in the room. All right, well, then, we have our marching orders, I think, for our staff and our consultants. They'll be back at the March meeting with some architectural and conceptual drawings. Looking forward to seeing that. And we will have Tim, Courtney, and Dan, one presumes, here for our February meeting to talk operational costs based on what we had asked them to look at back in December.
Absolutely.
Cool. Thank you all. Next on our agenda is item 8, public comment. I have a number of green cards here from the first round. Does anyone wish to go again? Yes, ma'am.
Do I need to stand
If you
up?
would, please, come to the podium so our audio recording can hear it.
You want me up here? One of the things that
Sorry,
you
your name
kept
was
talking
Suzanne,
about,
correct?
is he the architect? I'm sorry, sir. But is getting rid of the senior-focused wellness equipment? No, absolutely not. That is used quite often with the senior center. I just would object to taking that away. I'm more concerned with using the senior center space for the parks and recreation staff and taking up our space to incorporate them where they could go into the community center space and be incorporated there where it's more with the community. You know, I'm probably not making any sense, but. And it would be really nice if this group would actually come to the senior center, like, and talk with us and see what we have right now. We've also been shorted, actually, already with space at the senior center. The school kind of came in and took one of our.
That was my fault, sorry.
I know, that's okay. And their work nurses are wonderful.
Yes.
But we've been, you know, we kept getting shorter and shorter. And actually, we had much more people before COVID. And that kind of, I think, scared people from coming back because we used to do lots of wonderful things. And I like the idea of having a space too for the band to practice. So we're not opposed to the community and the parks and recreation thing, but just to, please don't take away what we already have now, which has even been more limited. And that's all I'm asking.
Okay, I'm sorry, can you give us your name one more time, please?
My name is Suzanne Aloha.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just for our minutes takers, that's helpful. Other members of the public who wish to speak? Yes, Jim Solson.
Thank you. Again, Jim Sols, president of the Meridian Community Band. An idea that kind of came in as we were talking about things is looking at being able to overlap spaces because we're separated in time. So I'm part of 2 community bands and have connections throughout, the greater Lansing area. Most rehearsals start at 7 p.m. Most of our concerts, at least for our band, we've been liking the 2 p.m. Sunday kind of time slot. And that doesn't overlap with at least the current senior center hours. And so if we have a shared space for those rehearsal times, and then some sort of private secured space for equipment, that's a great way to have one room that gets used more hours of the day. So again, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Other members of the public wishing to speak? Barbara?
Thank you. Barbara O'Kelly, 2576 Wood Hill Senior Center Advisory Board. I have a couple of answers to a couple of questions that came up. I think Mary, is it your name?
Michelle.
Michelle. The existing space is shown in my Phase 1 table down at the bottom of my communication. And that essentially duplicates the spaces in it, but it picks up all the lines from their table, from Progressive's table. We have a small fitness room, as Suzanne mentioned. It's just about 120 square feet, so it can be much smaller. Our interior space now is 9,600 square feet. I think they added the 35% for the walls and things to get to a current estimate of 11,000 being comparable for a new space. We do not need a 120 person room for jazzercise. But we do, so the 1,300 square foot room that's proposed would be adequate for the largest, I think, functions that we have now at the senior center. But for jazzercise, it would be much improved if we could have the athletic type flooring rather than the standard hard flooring. The separate entrance, thank you very much. That would be appreciated, not just for the entrance and the privacy, but also because then we could have dedicated parking near there. Some of us, like me right now, I don't have a handicap sticker, but I had a knee replacement 3 weeks ago. And so I would like to be able to park fairly close to the entrance, even without a handicap sticker. I understand that in terms of phasing, that additional costs are certainly a concern. But one thing to point out that I've had pointed out by our treasurer, township treasurer, is that for the last many years anyhow, our property tax revenues have increased substantially faster than the rate of inflation. And so many of those additional building costs would be offset by the increased revenues from existing millages. So that's, I think, should be considered as part of both the building and the operating budgets. And a question for Mr. Hood, Mr. Malley. The Williamston schools have at least some of their basketball gym in the high school. I have friends that play pickleball there on Saturdays. Is there a possibility, at least until we could get a dedicated space, that we could use some other community space for pickleball courts?
Thank you very much. All right, anyone else for public comment? We consider public comment closed at 8:06 p.m. Next on our agenda is item 9, adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Member Robertson. Seconded by Member Nato Ferris. All those in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We stand adjourned at 8:06 p.m.